At the station, mail-order bride saves dying rich cowboy. You're coming with me. Dustcliff Station sat at the edge of the Sable 7 desert like a tired old sentinel, its metal walls scarred by years of sun, sandstorms, and the occasional skirmish. Hover trains hissed in the distance, carrying miners, traders, and travelers to far-off settlements, their lights blinking like fireflies against the dim orange sky. The air smelled of metal, dust, and engine oil. Clara Bennett tightened her grip on the strap of her travel bag as she stepped off the platform. Her boots crunched against the dusty metal floor, sending small clouds into the air. She had never been to Sable 7 before, never imagined she would be traveling across galaxies for a life she didn't fully understand. She was a mail-order bride, yes, but not the timid, nervous type her letters might have made her sound. She was determined, clever, and ready to face the unknown. "Welcome to Dustcliff Station," a voice said behind her. Clara turned to see a station worker in a dusty brown uniform. "Watch the carts. They don't slow down for anything or anyone." He tipped his hat and vanished into the crowd. Clara adjusted her bag and scanned the busy platform. Merchants shouted their goods, glowing fruits from distant moons, water purifiers that promised life in the harsh desert, and mechanical gadgets that blinked and whirred. Hover wagons rumbled past, carrying livestock, some organic, some cyber-enhanced. The station smelled alive, chaotic, and dangerous. She had one simple task: find her intended husband, Colton Drake, a wealthy rancher whose estate sprawled over the red sands of Sable 7, but no one had given her clear instructions, and the station, with its noise and flashing lights, felt like a maze. Clara took a deep breath, reminding herself she could handle this. She had handled far worse than confusion in crowds. That's when she saw him, or rather, his wagon. A sleek hover wagon, unlike anything most settlers could afford, glided into the station. Its polished metal gleamed even under Dustcliff's orange haze, but something was wrong. Inside, lying across the cushions, was a man pale as moonlight. His breathing was shallow, and his skin had a strange metallic tint, as if the desert had already begun to claim him. Clara's heart tightened. This must be Colton. She rushed forward, stepping over debris and warning lights, ignoring the murmurs and stares of the crowd. "Sir!" she called, leaning into the hover wagon. Are you okay?" Colton's eyes flickered open. They were golden brown, sharp and intelligent, but clouded with pain. You shouldn't be here," he croaked, his voice weak. "It's too dangerous." Clara knelt beside him. "Danger or not, I can't leave you like this. You need help." Her tone left no room for argument. She could see he was burning up, feverish, his hands trembling, some rare desert illness, the local merchants had whispered. It could kill him if untreated. A sudden jolt ran through the station as a hover train screeched past. Sparks flew from the platform edge, a loose crate toppled and rolled toward Colton's wagon. Without thinking, Clara lunged, grabbing his arm and pulling him out of the way just as the crate slammed into the side of the hover wagon. The impact dented the metal, sending a shower of sparks into the dusty air. The crowd gasped, some stepping back in fear. Clara, however, only took a deep breath, brushing dust from her coat. Colton lay on the ground, coughing but alive. His hand instinctively reached toward hers, but he didn't speak, as if too weak to find words. "You're coming with me," Clara said firmly, helping him to his feet. She had no idea what she would do next, only that leaving him here to die was impossible. Before Colton could protest, a shadow fell across the station. A group of rough-looking men, armed with plasma pistols and wearing patched armor, were moving through the crowd, scanning. Clara's stomach tightened. These were bounty hunters, or worse, corporate thugs, looking for someone rich. And Colton was exactly that. Clara grabbed his arm again, quickly. "This way," she whispered, steering him toward the less crowded part of the station. They ducked behind crates of neon-lit cargo, barely avoiding the gaze of the armed men. Sparks from the overhead rail systems flickered dangerously, illuminating their path like strobe lights. Colton leaned heavily on her shoulder. "You don't know what you're getting into," he murmured. "They won't stop. They might try," Clara said simply. "But I've made it this far. I won't leave you." Her determination seemed to give him a flicker of hope. Slowly, with her supporting him, they reached the edge of the platform. Clara spotted a small hover car, abandoned and dusty, hidden near the station's edge. It wasn't much, but it could carry them away, at least until the hunters lost track. "Can you sit?" she asked, helping him into the seat. Colton nodded weakly, leaning back. Clara jumped in beside him, starting the engine. The hover car hummed to life, and with a careful push they lifted off the platform and glided into the open desert. Dustcliff Station shrank behind them, a tiny speck against the endless dunes. Clara exhaled, finally allowing herself a small smile. She had saved him, from the crate, from the immediate danger of the station, and, she hoped, from the illness that plagued him. Colton looked at her, his golden eyes steadying. I don't know who you are, he admitted, voice rough, but you just saved my life. Clara shrugged, trying to keep it casual, though her heart was pounding. I'm Clara Bennett, and you're coming with me. A long silence followed as the hovercar glided over the red sands. The desert seemed endless, broken only by the occasional jagged rock formations and the glowing eyes of distant creatures watching from afar. Clara couldn't help but feel a thrill. She had stepped into the unknown, and now she was responsible not only for her own survival, but for the life of a man who could barely stand. Hours passed. Colton grew quieter, his breathing steady but still weak. Clara kept talking, pointing out landmarks, making jokes, telling stories of her travels through other planets. Slowly, the tension eased. It wasn't just about saving him physically, it was about keeping him alive mentally, keeping his mind away from fear. As night fell, the desert turned to deep purple, stars stretching across the sky like glitter spilled on black velvet. The two of them camped near a small rock formation that offered shelter from the cold desert wind. Clara made a simple meal from the rations she had brought, sharing it with Colton, who could barely eat. You really think this'll work? He asked, gazing at the stars. Finding the herb, staying alive out here. Clara looked at him, her face set with determination. I don't just think it will work, I know it will. But we have to keep moving, and we have to trust each other. I saved you back there, and now I'll do it again, every time if I have to. Colton managed a faint smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. You're relentless, he said. And you're lucky, Clara replied with a small laugh. Most people don't get saved by strangers who turn into heroes overnight. The wind howled through the desert, carrying dust and distant echoes of the station. Yet despite the danger, despite the unknown that stretched before them, Clara felt a surge of confidence. She had stepped into a story bigger than herself, a story that would test her courage, her wit, and her heart, and somehow she felt ready. As they settled under the stars, Clara kept watch. The desert was alive with unseen creatures, shifting sands, and the hum of distant machinery. Danger was everywhere, but so was possibility. Tomorrow they would continue their journey, facing threats that Clara could only imagine. But tonight, they had survived. Tonight, Colton Drake was alive because she had dared to act, and that was enough for now. The desert of Sable. 7 stretched endlessly, its red sands rolling like waves under a purple sky. Clara steered the small hovercar carefully, keeping her eyes on the horizon. Colton leaned back, still pale, his breathing slow and uneven. Every so often he would glance out the side window, his golden eyes scanning the distance. They'll come after us, he said quietly, his voice weak but tense. They always do. Clara didn't look at him. Then we'll make sure they don't catch us, she said. Her hands gripped the controls tightly, her knuckles white. I'm not leaving you out here to die. Not now, not ever. Colton gave a faint half-smile. You don't know what you're getting into. I think I do, Clara said with a shrug, and I don't care. The desert wind howled around them as they glided over jagged rock formations, their hovercar kicking up clouds of red dust. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the dunes. The light reflected off Colton's pale skin, making him look almost unreal, like a ghost drifting through the desert. Suddenly a bright flash appeared on the horizon. Clara squinted. The flash moved fast, and within seconds she could see them. 3 hovercrafts, sleek and black, cutting through the sands like predators. They were armed, no doubt sent by someone who wanted Colton's fortune or simply wished him gone. Bounty hunters, Colton muttered, his voice rough. He tried to sit up straighter, but his weakness forced him to lean back again. They're not going to catch us, Clara said, though her stomach tightened. Hold on. She pushed the hovercar faster, the engine humming loudly. The desert sand beneath them blurred, kicking up in great waves as they raced across dunes and canyons. The hunters closed in quickly, their weapons flashing. Energy blasts cut through the air, leaving trails of blue and green sparks. Clara ducked instinctively as a blast hit the rock beside them, sending sand and pebbles flying. Colton grabbed her arm. We can't outrun them forever, Clara's mind raced. She knew the desert well enough to have a chance. If they could reach the canyon ahead, the narrow cliffs would give them cover and make it harder for the hovercrafts to follow. "Canyon up ahead," she shouted, twisting the controls. The hovercar tilted and veered sharply, sliding down the slope of a dune. Colton's stomach lurched, and he gripped the seat. "You're crazy," he said, though there was awe in his voice. "Crazy enough to save your life," Clara shot back. The hunters were relentless. Their hovercrafts swerved and fired, energy blasts striking rocks around them.
Clara leaned forward,
firing back with a small plasma pistol she had tucked in her bag. Sparks hit the nearest craft, and one of the hunters yelled in frustration. As they entered the canyon, the desert changed. The cliffs rose like jagged walls, shadows darkening the narrow passage. Clara slowed slightly, using the tight space to her advantage. The hovercraft struggled to keep pace, their wide frames unable to maneuver as quickly as her small car. Colton's breathing was shallow, but he gripped her arm. You might actually get us out of this," he said. "I told you," Clara said with a grin. "I don't leave anyone behind." The canyon twisted and turned. Clara spotted an overhang above and had an idea. She veered toward it, and with a precise jolt, the hovercar launched a small flare up the cliff face. The flare exploded, startling a flock of desert-winged creatures resting on the rocks. The creatures shrieked and swooped down, scattering the hunters below. Colton's eyes widened. You tricked them." "Sometimes brains are better than weapons," Clara said. The hunters recovered quickly, though, firing blindly into the canyon. Clara ducked again as a blast grazed the side of the hovercar. Sparks flew and a small panel burned out. She knew they didn't have much time. "We need to keep moving," she said, steering sharply toward a narrow gap between two cliffs. The hovercar scraped the edges but passed through. The hunters weren't as lucky. One hovercraft slammed into the cliffside, spinning out of control. The other two followed, but Clara had gained enough distance to see a small ridge ahead where they could rest for a moment. They landed on the ridge, dust swirling around them. Colton slumped, exhausted. Clara put a hand on his shoulder. "We're okay, for now." Colton gave a weak laugh. "You really are relentless," he said, shaking his head. "Why are you doing this?" Clara looked at him, her eyes serious. "Because it's the right thing. Because you matter. And because someone has to make sure you survive." For a moment, silence fell. The desert stretched endlessly around them, the wind whispering through the rocks. Colton studied Clara, admiration mixed with something deeper in his eyes. "I've never met anyone like you," he admitted. "Good," Clara said with a small smile, "because there aren't many like me." Night fell over the desert, and the sky turned to deep indigo, dotted with unfamiliar stars. Clara set up a small energy shield around the hovercar for warmth and protection. She had just enough rations and water to last until morning, and she shared some with Colton. He ate slowly, clearly still weak, but she encouraged him gently. "We can't stay here long," she said softly. "They'll keep coming." Colton nodded. Where are we going?" Clara's eyes traced the horizon. "There's a place in the glass cliffs. That's where we'll find the herb you need. It's dangerous, but it's the only way to save you." Colton swallowed hard. "I've heard of that place. No one survives it without help." "Then you have me," Clara said firmly. For the rest of the night, they kept watch, alternating between rest and vigilance. Clara couldn't stop thinking about the hovercrafts and the bounty hunters. She knew they had enemies now, and Seven's desert was unforgiving. But every time she looked at Colton, his face pale under the dim light of the stars, she felt a renewed determination. By dawn, the desert had shifted. The red sands glimmered under the early sun, and the distant cliffs seemed taller, sharper, more dangerous. Clara restarted the hovercar, lifting off the ridge. Colton sat beside her, still weak but alert. The journey ahead was long, and the desert offered no mercy. Energy blasts could strike at any moment, rogue AI drones could appear without warning, and the narrow canyons could easily trap them. Yet Clara felt a thrill she hadn't expected. This was adventure. This was survival. This was the beginning of something bigger than herself. Hours passed as they navigated the desert. Colton, despite his weakness, helped when he could. He learned to read the terrain, spotting areas where the sand shifted too easily, or where rocks could serve as cover. Clara shared her knowledge of basic survival and combat tactics. Together they were learning to rely on each other in ways neither had anticipated. As the sun began to dip low again, they spotted a strange sight in the distance, a field of glowing crystals jutting from the sand like teeth. The crystals pulsed faintly, casting eerie shadows across the dunes. Clara slowed the hovercar, studying the formations. Those are the warning fields, Colton whispered. Nomads use them to mark territory. Stay alert. Clara nodded. We'll get through. Just stay close. The crystals hummed faintly as they passed, an otherworldly sound that vibrated through the hovercar. Clara's heart raced, but she didn't falter. She had to get Colton to the glass cliffs. She had to save him. And she would. The glass cliffs rose from the desert like jagged teeth, their edges catching the sunlight and throwing rainbows across the sand. Clara squinted against the glare, gripping the hovercar's controls tightly. Colton sat beside her, his body still weak, but his golden eyes were sharp, scanning the cliffs. This is it, Clara said. The herb you need grows at the top. We just have to get past whatever's guarding it. Colton nodded, though his expression betrayed worry. I've heard stories, he said. Nomads, cyber-enhanced. They don't take kindly to intruders. Clara's jaw set. Good thing I don't intend to be an intruder. The hovercar hummed quietly as they approached the cliffs. The closer they got, the more dangerous the terrain became. Sharp rock formations jutted from the desert floor and narrow ledges ran along the cliff sides. Any wrong move could send them plummeting into the sand below. As they neared a natural landing platform halfway up the cliffs, Clara spotted movement. Figures emerged from behind the rocks. Humans with cybernetic enhancements, glowing implants along their arms and necks. Their eyes reflected the sun like mirrors, and their weapons hummed with energy. Nomads, Colton whispered. We're in their territory. Clara didn't flinch. Then we talk, she said. She stepped out of the hovercar first, raising her hands slightly. We mean no harm. We only need a few plants to save a life. The nomads circled them, moving silently, their mechanical limbs giving them an unnerving grace. One stepped forward, a tall woman with a silver implant running down her cheek. No one takes from the cliffs without permission, she said, her voice cold, almost metallic. Clara stayed calm. Permission isn't always possible when someone is dying, but I can make a deal. The nomads exchanged glances. The woman tilted her head. A deal? Yes, Clara said, thinking quickly. I can help you with your defenses. I know tech. I can repair or improve your systems. In exchange, you let us take enough herb to save him. She gestured toward Colton, who was leaning weakly against a rock. The woman's eyes narrowed. Why should we trust a stranger? Clara met her gaze steadily. Because if we die trying to steal your herb, your systems will never know the difference. But if we survive, everyone benefits. There was a long pause. The desert wind whistled through the cliffs, and even the humming of their implants seemed louder in the silence. Finally, the woman spoke. One chance. One opportunity. You fail, you die. Clara nodded. Deal. They followed the nomads through narrow paths and over jagged rocks. Clara noticed small details, loose panels in their defense systems, outdated energy conduits that could be improved. She pointed them out to the leader, and by the time they reached the top platform where the herb grew, the nomads were impressed by her quick thinking. Colton, though still weak, followed her closely. You really do know your way around tech, he said quietly. I wouldn't have survived the canyon without you. Clara smiled faintly, helping him over a loose stone. And I wouldn't survive the desert without you alert and alive. At last, they reached the alien plants. They glowed faintly, shimmering with blue and green light, their roots clinging tightly to the cliff rocks. Clara carefully cut a small batch, making sure to leave enough for the nomad's ecosystem. Just as they were about to leave, a sudden roar echoed through the cliffs. From the shadows, a massive desert creature emerged. 4 legs, armored scales, and eyes glowing like molten gold. It hissed, moving quickly toward them. Colton stumbled backward, fear and weakness making them slow. Clara acted without thinking. She grabbed a small energy net from her bag and threw it, ensnaring one of the creature's legs. Sparks flew as the net shocked it lightly, causing it to roar in pain. Hold on, Clara shouted, helping Colton to keep moving. Together, they ran toward a safer ledge, the nomads flanking them, using their cyber implants to distract the creature. Once they reached the hovercar, Clara helped Colton inside. The nomads gave a nod, a silent acknowledgement of her courage. You've proven yourself, the leader said. Take what you need, but leave the rest, and leave quickly. Clara started the hovercar and lifted off the ledge, her heart racing. Colton, breathing heavily, managed a small laugh. You really do save my life everywhere we go. I told you, Clara said with a grin. I'm not leaving anyone behind. As they glided away from the cliffs, Clara looked back. The nomads watched silently, their glowing eyes disappearing into the shadows. The alien herb in their possession shimmered faintly, a promise of healing and survival. Colton rested beside her, his hand brushing hers briefly. I owe you more than I can say, he murmured. You don't owe me, Clara said softly. Just survive. That's all the thanks I need. The sun began to set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Clara guided the hover car along the cliffs, careful to avoid sudden drops and loose rocks. The herb would save Colton, but their journey wasn't over. There were still dangers ahead, hunters, rogue drones, and the harsh desert itself. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the hum of the hover car and Colton's soft breathing. Clara kept one hand on the controls and one on her small pack of tools, ready for anything. Every shadow, every movement in the distance could be a threat. As night fell, the desert transformed. Strange lights appeared on the horizon, flickering like distant stars. Clara adjusted the hovercar's sensors. Probably more patrols, she said. We'll have to stay sharp. Colton nodded, though he looked exhausted. I don't know how you do it, he said. I wouldn't have lasted half the day without you. Clara smiled faintly. You'd last longer than you think. But I'd rather not find out the hard way. They camped near a small rock formation that offered some protection from the cold night wind. Clara set up an energy shield around the hovercar. She shared water and rations with Colton, careful not to overdo it. Tomorrow, Clara said softly, we keep moving. We have to get you back to Dustcliff Station safely. Colton reached for her hand, a rare gesture of trust and gratitude. I don't know what I'd do without you, he whispered. You won't find out, Clara said firmly. I've got you. The night was long and cold, but Clara remained vigilant. She watched the desert, the stars above, and the distant cliffs where they had faced danger. She knew the journey ahead would be even more challenging. But for now, they had survived the glass cliffs. They had faced danger and come out alive. And most importantly, they had done it together. As she drifted into a light sleep beside Colton, Clara felt a small sense of victory. The herb was secure, Colton was alive. And despite the dangers of Sable, 7, she was ready for whatever came next. The desert was still dangerous, and the hunters would not give up. But Clara Bennett, a young woman from another world, had proven that courage, cleverness, and determination could overcome even the harshest challenges, and she would continue to prove it, no matter what lay ahead. The desert of Sable, 7 stretched endlessly beneath the twin suns, now climbing higher in the sky as Clara guided the hovercar carefully along the jagged dunes. The alien herb rested safely in a small compartment beside her, its faint glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Colton, though still pale, sat upright beside her, his hand resting lightly on the edge of the seat. We made it out, he said, his voice quieter than usual, yet filled with relief. I can't believe it. Clara smiled faintly, keeping her eyes on the path. We did, but we're not home yet. Dustcliff Station isn't far, but the desert isn't going to make it easy. Colton nodded. His golden eyes scanned the dunes ahead, the subtle shimmer of heat waves making the landscape seem alive. He had survived illness, ambushes, and the glass cliffs, but he still felt fragile. And yet every step of the journey had revealed Clara's courage, her skill, and her determination to protect him at all costs. The first obstacle came sooner than expected. A sudden storm whipped through the dunes, sand and debris flying in great arcs. Clara gritted her teeth as she adjusted the hovercar's shields, which hummed and flickered under the pressure. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Hold on, she shouted over the roar of the storm. This might get rough. Colton braced himself, gripping the edge of the seat. The hovercar bounced over hidden rocks and dips in the desert, each movement threatening to throw them off balance. Clara focused every ounce of attention on the controls, weaving, ducking, and adjusting in precise movements. The storm howled around them, but she refused to slow down. Hours passed as the storm raged. Clara relied on the hovercar's sensors, her instincts, and her quick thinking to navigate through the treacherous terrain. Occasionally, she would glance at Colton. Though exhausted, he never complained. He trusted her completely, and that trust made her more determined than ever. At last, the storm began to ease, leaving only the soft orange haze of the desert. Clara exhaled, wiping the sweat and dust from her forehead. Colton leaned back, visibly relieved. I didn't think we'd make it through that one, he said, voice hoarse. We did, Clara said with a small grin. And we'll make it back to Duskcliff, too. Their journey continued, tense but steady. The desert seemed almost peaceful now, but Clara knew better than to let her guard down. The bounty hunters, the rogue drones, and other unknown dangers could be lurking anywhere. Yet the mood between them had shifted. They were no longer just traveler and passenger. They were partners, relying on each other, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the dunes, Clara spotted the familiar outlines of Duskcliff Station in the distance. Relief washed over her. Soon, Colton would be safe, and the desert, at least for now, would no longer hold power over them. We're almost there, she said, her voice lighter than it had been for days. Just a little longer. Colton nodded, though he remained quiet, as if savoring the moment. His eyes lingered on Clara, filled with gratitude and admiration. He realized how much she had risked for him, how brave and clever she truly was. He had thought he would meet a mail-order bride, a stranger who would eventually arrive at his estate. But Clara was nothing like he expected. She was resourceful, fearless, and compassionate. She had saved his life, more than once. As they approached the station, a sudden movement caught Clara's eye. A hovercraft appeared on the ridge above, glinting in the fading sunlight. The bounty hunters had not given up. Not today, Clara muttered, her fingers tightening on the controls. She didn't hesitate. With a sharp twist, she maneuvered the hovercar toward a narrow canyon that would slow the pursuers. Energy blasts streaked past, striking the cliffs and sending sparks into the air. Colton instinctively ducked, though Clara could see a spark of excitement in his eyes. He trusted her. The canyon narrowed, forcing the hovercraft to slow while Clara's smaller vehicle darted through the gaps with precision. She fired a few well-aimed pulses from her plasma pistol, causing the hunters to veer off course. Within minutes she had lost them, disappearing into the canyon's shadow. Colton let out a deep breath. You really are unstoppable, he said, a faint smile breaking across his face. Clara chuckled softly. I've had practice, she said. Now just a little further and we'll be safe. Duskcliff Station rose before them, lights blinking against the darkening desert. Clara guided the hover car to a quiet platform, carefully landing without attracting too much attention. The station was quieter than before, most travelers having already retired for the evening. Only a few merchants and guards lingered, their eyes widening as they noticed the glowing alien herb safely packed in Clara's bag. Colton stepped out of the hover car, steadying himself with Clara's help. He looked around, then down at her. I don't know how to thank you, he said. I'm alive because of you. Not many would have done what you did. Clara shrugged, smiling gently. You don't have to thank me. Just live and make the most of it. They walked together toward the station's medical bay. Colton's condition required immediate attention, and the alien herb would need careful preparation to work properly. Clara stayed by his side, helping the doctors as best she could, showing them how the herb had been harvested and preserved. Hours later, Colton's fever broke. Color returned to his skin, and his breathing became steady. Clara watched, a sense of quiet triumph filling her chest. She had done what she had set out to do. She had saved a life. And in doing so, she had discovered strength within herself she hadn't known existed. When Colton finally sat up, he looked at her with deep gratitude. Clara, you've changed my life. I don't know what I'd have done without you. You'd be alive, Clara said simply, brushing a strand of dust-covered hair from her face. That's enough. Colton reached for her hand, a rare gesture of trust and warmth. No, he said firmly. It's more than enough. You didn't just save me, you gave me hope. You've shown me that courage, cleverness, and heart matter more than wealth or power. I want you in my life, not just as someone who saved me, but as someone who belongs here. Clara felt her heart lift. She had never expected this when she signed up for the mail-order journey. She had expected uncertainty, perhaps disappointment, maybe even fear, but what she found was adventure, purpose, and a connection stronger than she could have imagined. Clara began, then paused. She looked around the medical bay, at the station, at Colton, and finally smiled. I think I belong here, she said softly, and I think I'll stay. Colton's smile was bright, warm, and genuine. Good, he said simply, because I need you. Not just for the adventure, but for everything else. Outside, the desert night stretched under a sky of brilliant stars. The winds were calm, and the harsh threats of the day had faded into memory. Clara and Colton stepped outside, hand in hand, feeling the soft night breeze and the hum of the station around them. The adventure was far from over. Sable, 7, was full of unknowns, but for the first time they felt safe. Together, they were stronger than the dangers of the desert. Clara glanced at the horizon, at the endless desert stretching far beyond the station. There would be more challenges, more threats, but she no longer feared them. With Colton beside her, she could face anything. And Colton, looking at Clara, understood that life had changed. No longer would he rely solely on wealth and status. Courage, loyalty, and love had carried him through the desert, and he would never forget the woman who had risked everything to save him. As the two of them watched the twin suns rise over the dunes the next morning, a new chapter began. Cliff Station was no longer just a stopover. It was home. The desert had tested them, pushed them to their limits, and revealed what truly mattered. And now, with the herb secured, the threats behind them, and trust and love binding them together, Clara and Colton looked toward the horizon. The galaxy was vast, full of danger and adventure, but they were ready. Together, they would face it all, side by side, heart to heart. The desert had been cruel, beautiful, and wild, but it had also shown them something precious: courage, hope, and the unshakable bond between two people who refused to leave each other behind. And as they rode back toward the station proper, ready to reclaim their lives and their future, Clara knew one thing with certainty: no matter what the galaxy threw at them, they would survive, and they would do it together.